and we are here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, now on Facebook and YouTube. And so here on Facebook, hanging out here, and very happy to be here on Facebook.com/LiveNowDT, as well as on YouTube.com/WakeUpCallDT, as Mr. Sofko will be joining us momentarily here where sports meets life. We'll be talking about the top 10s at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end in the 2021 NFL Draft, with the draft just a few days away. So let's bring in the man of the hour in the Fantasy Football Power Hour, proudly presented by the Wildcat Sports Pub, 3680 Milton Avenue in Camillus, New York. Very, very happy, as always, to promote them and be there with them. And they are open 7 days a week for indoor dining, as well as for takeout and delivery, by calling 315-487-2222. And they're here with us every single week for the Fantasy Football Power Hour. So let's bring in Mike. Mike, how are we doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you, Dan?
I'm doing well. And Mike, you know, you and I, this is a very exciting time for us to look at the draft, to look at the players, to look at the talent. The future of the NFL starts today, and we have the opportunity to break down the players that we think are really going to make an impact. So I got a board up here for you. I got a board up here for me. We're going to go quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And so I'm going to let you do your 10, and I'll do my 10. So I'm going to bring your board up here on Facebook.com/LiveNowDT and on YouTube.com/WakeUpCallDT. And Mike, whenever you are ready, you can give me, in order, your number 1 to your number 10 quarterbacks for this year's NFL Draft.
Yeah, you know, looking at this overall class, it's very easy to say that quarterbacks are going to be taken near the top of the draft. I mean, 4 or 5 of them are going to be in the top 10. Maybe the first 4 picks are quarterbacks. So looking at this, obviously Trevor Lawrence is going to go number 1. He's going to go number 1 to the Jaguars. I think that's the only reason why Urban Meyer took the job. He's aligned himself with great quarterbacks. Same thing happened when he went to the University of Florida with Tim Tebow. Number 2, I'm looking at Justin Fields. Justin Fields at one time was the number 1 quarterback in the country coming out of high school, went to Georgia, lost his job due to injury, and then transferred to Ohio State and still proved to be a winner. I think if Trevor Lawrence wasn't around, Justin Fields would be, you know, sought after as the number 1 overall pick, let alone number 1 overall quarterback. I got Trey Lance ranked 3rd. He's got a lot of potential, a lot of upside. I know he doesn't have a lot of passes, just under 400 passes, basically 1 season of football with the changes with the COVID year here. But I think he offers the most upside. Looking at game film of him, he looks like he's well-rounded, well-coached, and he looks like he's a down-to-earth guy. Number 4 is Zach Wilson. Now, I understand the Jets are probably in love with Zach Wilson at 2, but compared to these other guys, I got Zach Wilson at 4. You know, before this past year, nobody even really knew who Zach Wilson was. So hats off to him for having a Joe Burrow-like year before the draft here and being able to be looked at as one of the top quarterback prospects that come out of BYU since Steve Young. And then number 5, I'm going Mac Jones here. Mac Jones, quarterback, Alabama. All he did was win. I mean, call him a system quarterback. Yeah, he had the best players in the country, more or less, but he still had to provide that talent on the field. He had to prove those emotions off the field. He had to prove his mental capacity on and off the field. This is a guy who was in a big situation, playing in big-time games, not frazzled, was able to connect and direct like the field general is supposed to. That's what the quarterback is. And number 6 is Kyle Trask. I think he still has a lot of upside. He's more of a traditional quarterback as well. I think the fight, the intestinal fortitude that I've seen in this guy, not always being the number 1. He wasn't even number 1 on his high school team. He was behind De'Ara King, the quarterback from the Miami Hurricanes. He goes to Florida, the only school that really had an interest in him because he went to a Florida football camp, and they offered him, even though he wasn't a starting quarterback in high school, and he wasn't a starting quarterback for the Gators. And then Felipe Franks goes down. He does his thing. He keeps his head down, keeps plugging away, and then before you know it, he's the starting quarterback. And then he's the starting quarterback his last year at Florida as well. Felipe Franks gets jettisoned elsewhere. Kellen Mond, I like Kellen Mond a lot. That's number 7 on my list. I think Kellen Mond is a guy who's not afraid of big-time situations. I mean, when you play at Texas A&M, you're playing in some big-time games. You're in the SEC, and A&M's about throwing the football. I mean, they got a lot of guys that are in the NFL in that capacity. Mike Evans is the biggest one that I can say that jumps to mind immediately. So I think Kellen Mond is going to prove not to be a Johnny Manziel, but he's going to prove to be a serviceable quarterback if given the opportunity. Davis Mills, I like Davis Mills a lot. I did get to see his second pro day yesterday, and I think the guys, you got to consider where the guy goes to school, first off. He goes to Stanford. You got to be smart to get into Stanford, okay? He's a smart guy. He's a smart guy on the field and off the field. I think that bodes well for him. I think the thing that most people underestimate with a quarterback is their intelligence. They have to know everything. They have to know where everybody is, make sure everybody's lined up correctly, because sometimes that's a challenge. And then you got to be able to adjust. You got to be able to direct traffic. So I think again, he's a serviceable quarterback. He's got some moves, but he was throwing the ball real well in the weather yesterday. Then I look at Jamie Newman, quarterback out of Wake Forest, before he transferred to Georgia in 2020. And although he opted out this past season with COVID situation, and let's not look down on anybody for doing that, because maybe someone has a loved one in their household that would have made them a potential. It could have all been bad, so I'm not going to look down on anybody that opted out this past year. But Jamie Newman looks like he's a capable quarterback with big-time programs. He has a strong arm. He's mobile as well, so I think that bodes well for him. And then on number 10, I had a couple guys up here, and it's been a battle. And the guy
Mike, not to interrupt you, but you had Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Kyle Trask, and then bring us through 7, 8, and 9 once again as we put them up here on the board.
Yeah, no worry. Number 7, I had Kellen Mond from Texas A&M.
Yep.
He's a guy that's in a big time program. I think he's got a big arm. I think he plays well. He's been a starter there for quite a while. Then I go to Davis Mills out of Stanford. He had a great pro day in the rain yesterday. Can throw the ball, drop it in on a dime. I like that a lot. And then I went with Jamie Newman, quarterback out of Georgia Wake Forest. This is a guy who had to sit out COVID, thing this past year. And then the last one is Shane Buechele. People are scratching their heads. Who is this guy? Who is this guy? Southern Methodist, University Mustangs, Texas guy, Texas product. This guy can play ball. So this is something for you to look at. Most guys after the top 4, they're like, yeah, no interest or whatever. If you're in a dynasty league or something, and maybe you got a quarterback now, maybe you got a quarterback that's on his way out a couple years. These are guys you can spend a late round pick on and invest in your future on your dynasty teams. I'm talking basically my 6 through 10: Trask, Mond, Mills, Newman, and Buechele. These other guys, these top 5, depending on where they land versus where we think they're going to land, they should all hit the field right away.
Yeah, and this is, taking a look at Mike's top 10 once again for those of you tuning in here, either by video or audio, to take a look at the top 10. Mike having Trevor Lawrence at number 1, that followed by Justin Fields and Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Kyle Trask, Kellen Mond, Davis Mills, Jamie Newman, who I had some time with at Wake Forest, and Shane Buechele. out of SMU. And now I have the opportunity to provide for you my top 10 when we look at quarterbacks here in this year's NFL draft. So my top 10 at the quarterback position for this year's draft. Excited to be able to bring this to you this morning on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. And, you know, I have a lot of the same names, but a little bit of difference. And, you know, that's kind of the beauty of it for us here, is to be able to bring you our different thoughts on, you know, where we think different people are going to fall, or where we maybe have them in our rankings and whatnot. So my number one, as far as quarterbacks go, and we'll put the top 10 QBs up here so that you know. But for those of you watching on Facebook, you got our whiteboard, which is cool for me because I get to write just like a teacher here, and I get to write the things out. I promise you that my writing on here, I'm better writing on paper, but to be able to put it up here on the whiteboard is pretty cool, and I love doing it here. So shout out to all of the awesome people with all of the software and everything I get to work with here in the studio. So much thanks to you for that. My number one is obviously Trevor Lawrence. I'm going to agree with Mr. Sofka here that Trevor Lawrence has to be number one on my list as far as quarterback rankings for this, our top 10 for this year's NFL draft for 2021. My number two is different, though. My number two is Zach Wilson. I'm more sold on him. I was almost sold on him to put him at number one, if not for Trevor Lawrence being in this year's draft. I would consider Zach Wilson being the guy that maybe Jacksonville is looking at. My number three, because I think he's going to make a big impact, he might actually fall to the New England Patriots, so brace yourselves for impact on this one. But my number three is Mac Jones out of Alabama. I had to wait his turn and found a lot of success. I got Mac Jones at number three. My number four is the guy with the question mark with a big upside, though. Kind of the player that's almost like looking at an NBA draft because they draft on upside, and that's Trey Lance coming out of North Dakota State. And I'm excited about what Trey can do. I have him projected as going to either the Niners or the Falcons, but we'll talk about that next week. My number five is Justin Fields. I'm not sold. That's why Justin Fields is here. I know that he did some great things against Clemson. I know that he has some good numbers, but I'm not sold. You know, Ohio State, and I know it's not his fault what other guys have done there, but there's the translation of Ohio State quarterbacks to the NFL in recent history hasn't really happened, and I know that each of them is different, and I hope it's different for Justin. I'm just not sold on his consistency, and I'm not sold yet on his leadership to take over a team right away. So that's why I put him at number five, because I think Mac Jones could step in and be a starter for the Patriots. Kyle Trask, I agree with Mike here. Kyle Trask is my number six. I think Kyle's been overshadowed by other people this year, and the reality of it all is I think he's done one hell of a job stepping in as quarterback. Felipe Franks was there, and things ended up changing, and so Kyle Trask takes over. His numbers were very, very strong, and some of the top three in the country type numbers, and so I got a lot of respect for him. The numbers he put up with Mac Jones were just incredible this year, and statistically, him and Mac Jones leaning at the top there, rising there. My number seven, this one's tough. By the numbers, Sam Howell of North Carolina has some pretty good numbers, but I'm not sold on actually, like, I've watched him play, and I'm not sold on it. So, I'm gonna do a Davis Mills move here, and I'm gonna put Davis Mills out of Stanford in this number seven spot, but it was hard for me to, think about Sam Howell here and look at his numbers, because his numbers are better than I thought they were. But, I just don't, I'm not sold on him. My number eight is Kellen Mond out of Texas A&M. I have him here. His numbers aren't terrific either, but I do think that he'll get himself a shot, and Texas A&M had a terrific season this season. I think there's good coming from that. And my number nine is a guy that's from the American Athletic Conference like Shane, and this is Brady White. Brady White is one of those guys for Memphis that had to deal with a head coaching change and all these things going on, and Brady has done a tremendous job, and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves, and I think he's one of those guys that could step in and make an impact, so I put him at number nine, and I agree with Mike with Shane Buechele out of SMU taking this final spot here. I thought Shane definitely held his own in his time there at SMU, and I would like to see what he can do in the NFL. So I'm excited to see exactly what he could bring to the table as Mike and I give you an almost even here, an almost exact top 10. And we don't see each other's top 10 lists before we start the broadcast. So just so you all know, that is where we are, and the cool thing about it is a lot of it looks the same, but there are some differences. There, Brady White is on my list, which is obviously different than the Jamie Newman, but I can, I hope the best for Jamie Newman as well, and Justin Fields, Mac Jones being flipped there, but a lot of it is the same. So I kind of like the fact that we get to show you that in this respect and have this connection where Mike and I had no idea what we were going to say, yet there's some similarities and just a little bit of differences in the top 10 at quarterbacks that we have for this. Mike, it's now time to flip to the running back side of things. This was a tough call for me. Outside of like the top 5, and one of my guys that I think, some people may not know, but maybe could be a sleeper and whatnot, I find that this was difficult for me to pick. So I'm going to hand it off to you and let you start things off here when it comes to the running back situation. But I can honestly tell you that, running, and I think, the other part of it too is there's really good running backs in the NFL right now. And so, some of these guys, it's going to be interesting to see how the rookie running backs kind of gel into it, because obviously there are opportunities and there are openings, there always are, and there's opportunities that can be created based on your ability to play and, connecting with the team and the playbook and all of that. There's a multitude of things that can, take a starting quarterback or starting a running back or starter anywhere and move them off and move a guy in that's a rookie. So I do think there's talent here, as always. I think there's a really cool story about how Jacksonville can somehow pull off something pretty incredible. But I'm going to move over to you, Mike, to give our thoughts here inside of the Fantasy Football Power Hour as Mike and I give our top 10s at quarterback as well as running back, wide receiver, and tight ends. And we can maybe like mold wide receiver and tight end because, it's up to you, Mike, but I think we can kind of maybe mold that. I have a little joke that that I'll be writing on the whiteboard when we're all set and ready to go with that, but I will defer to you to start things off with your top 10 running backs that you have in this year's draft.
Well, you got to start with the big programs. Big-time players go to big-time schools most of the time, and these big-time players make big-time plays in big-time game situations. You look at Najee Harris out of Alabama. He was the number 1 running back recruit in the nation when he arrived in Tuscaloosa, and he got better each year. That's the scary thing. Now, the NFL downplays the running backs as of late, so even though some of these guys are worthy of number 1 picks, the way the NFL views players and player rankability, the running backs are a little less important to them, and they feel that if they have a player or two around the running back, that's going to make any running back that much better. So they're seeing running backs as value picks. But at a certain time, you have to pick these guys. I think Najee Harris is worthy. Number 1 on my top 10 list. Yeah, he comes from Alabama. Yeah, they won a bunch of games. Yeah, he had a bunch of great players around him. Yes, that's why you should have this guy. Yeah. He's going to have great players around him in the NFL. He's going to be one of the best coming out of college. He was the best coming out of high school. He's a big back, 232 pounds. I don't know why you would not look at Najee Harris as your first running back. The only way I could see you possibly not doing that is going with the 3-time All-American Travis at the end. And you say the same thing. Well, he was at Clemson. Give these guys a break. You can't penalize a guy because he's highly talented and the best went after him, and he did the best when he got the opportunity. Travis Etienne, worthy of a pick. He's somewhat of a sizable back as well at 215 pounds. Number 3, this is kind of a weird pick for me because, well, number 3 is going to be connected to number 4. The same team, Javonte Williams.
Mike, we seem to have lost you here for a second. We're going to work to get Mike back here on the line here in just a moment, as I don't want to miss a second of what he said. And I know where he's going with these picks, and as we give our top 10 running backs in this year's NFL draft. So, Mike, we lost you there for a second, cut out. So you had Travis Etienne at number 2, and you were talking about number 3 and number 4.
Javonte Williams on this list. Two guys almost look identical. Tortora's a little bit shorter, but they're within 11 pounds. Isn't the Thor guy? He's one guy. Led the FBS in broken tackles and first down carries last year. He was also a linebacker, turned running back as a senior high school. So he's still.
Hey.
Carter's right now. Runners, excellent.
Oh, and Mike, we lost Mike again here. He's cutting in and out, so we're going to give it another try. We know where he's going here with the players, but his connection on the other side here, a little bit difficult to hear him. I want to make sure we can hear him okay. So, all right, Mike, your connection's kind of cutting in and out on your end, so hopefully we can get this rocking and rolling again. I don't want the fans to miss anything that you said. So you got Javonte Williams at 3, Michael Carter at number 4. Go ahead with what you were saying.
It is more of a NFL runner now. That like a shorter and back shorter. Some he can be a little, and he
all right, we're gonna take a step aside here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora for a fast break. When we come back, Mike will give us the rest of his top 10, as I want to make sure that we can hear him come through here on his side. So we'll take a step aside for a fast break. When we come back, Mr. Sofka will be giving us his thoughts on the running backs and ranking the top 10 running backs in this year's NFL draft right after this fast break where sports truly meets life inside of the Cafe Kubal studios. You're listening and watching Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, and this is the Fantasy Football Power Hour, proudly presented by the Wildcat Sports Pub on 3680 Milton Avenue in Camillus, New York.
Carvel DeWitt, it's what happy tastes like. Do you know why? Because we make ice cream. Creamy, rich, flavorful ice cream. Not yogurt or iced milk like some of our competitors. Ice cream. Fresh, by hand, daily. For the calorie conscious, we have something new for you. Our new Carvelite. Same great flavor, creaminess, and texture of our regular ice cream with only 35 calories an ounce. So whether you want an ice cream cake, flying saucer, dasher, carvalanche, hard or soft ice cream, we will satisfy your craving with our fresh, handmade regular or new Carvelite ice cream. Carvel DeWitt. It's what happy tastes like.
Cafe Kubal offers same-day local delivery of our products, offering no delivery charge for Onondaga County. Shop cafekubal.com for fresh roasted coffee beans, cold brew, travel mugs, and all your essential Cafe Kubal needs. Cafe Kubal, coffee for the soul.
The Wildcat Sports Pub in Camillus, New York is located on 3680 Milton Avenue in the Home Depot Plaza. It is your family-friendly sports bar and restaurant. Folks, some sports bars aren't family-friendly. Some family-friendly restaurants are not sports bars. The Wildcat Sports Pub in Camillus, New York is proud to be both. It is that marriage that you've been looking for years. The Wildcat Sports Pub is your home base for your sports bar and restaurant needs, games for the kids, indoor and outdoor activities, and enough things on the menu to come back every single week and get to try something new. They're open Sundays from noon to 8 p.m., Monday through Wednesday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., and Thursday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to midnight. For reservations and party information, call 315 487-2222 for the Wildcat family-friendly sports pub and restaurant. Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on wakeupcalldt.com, your one-stop sports shop, and on mixlr.com/wakeupcalldt. Happy to be here with you where sports truly meets that thing called life, and very honored and privileged to be here with you this morning. So we took a step aside for a fast break inside the Cafe Kubal studios. We're back with Mr. Sofka, and we're back with his top 10 picks at top 10 ranking of running backs in the 2021 NFL Draft. So the top 10 running backs that he has in the 2021 NFL Draft by his calculations. So, Mike, go ahead. We have Najee Harris, number 1, out of Alabama. Number 2, Travis Etienne. And you had Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, the teammates out of North Carolina. Go ahead with 3 and 4.
Yeah, Javonte Williams, I think, is the bigger. He's the thunder to the lightning and thunder. Javonte Williams, perfectly capable running back, and he's still learning how to play running back. He was a linebacker turned running back in his senior year in high school, so he has some time to develop yet. 5'9", 212 pounds. And his partner, Michael Carter, I have him right behind him, 5'7", 201 pounds. Carter's the more patient runner. He's the Le'Veon Bell type. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's an asset as a receiver. He's a must-have on the field. Then at number 5, I take a look at Trey Sermon out of Ohio State. Again, I hear, I get added at on Twitter. Oh, these guys play for the big programs. Yes. And big programs get the best players usually. And when you succeed at a big program, that makes it all that much better. He does have some durability concerns. He cracked a vertebrae in his tailbone in 2015, tore the LCL in his left knee in 19, and dislocated the SC joint in his left shoulder on the first play of the national title game in January. So there is some trepidation here. But assuming he's healthy and can pass an NFL physical, he's number 5 on my list. And then I go to Kenneth Gainwell. A lot of people don't know who this cat is. He's just a sophomore at Memphis, 5'8", another small guy. Kind of reminds me of Michael Carter. 4 family members of his died from COVID-related issues. So he was a 1-year starter opting out of 2020. He had 5 offensive plays of more than 60 yards in 19. He's a threat when he's lined up in the slot. So it seems he's like one of those tweener players. He's like a Julian Edelman, but he can run the ball effectively as well, probably better than Edelman. So this is a guy will get drafted at the running back spot. He'll go to, a situation where they need a pass catching or a third down back to start. And then you got to look at a name a lot of people have heard because it's a fun name to say, Chuba Hubbard, the junior out of Oklahoma State, 210-pounder. He's from Canada. He had a great sophomore season in Stillwater. He's elusive. He did have a fumbling problem in college. He did have 11 fumbles, but those are things that can be coached. I can coach you a lot of different ways. I can teach you how to do a lot of things. I can't teach you how to be fast. I can't teach you how to have vision and cut back and so forth. So these are some of the things that can be coached. So I'm not doubting Chuba Hubbard's ability. I like him at 7. My number 8 is Kyleen Hill, Mississippi State. Guy is solid up and down, 5'10", 214 pounds. He's an aggressive power runner. He had a great year a great career in the SEC. This is a hard-nosed football player. I like him a lot. And then I also look at Jamar Jefferson. Jamar Jefferson, Oregon State. Now, being a lot of our fans probably are on the East Coast, you may not even know who this guy is. Well, let me tell you who he is. He's a highly productive player, top 5 in school history in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, 100-yard rushing games, and he breaks off plays. He can take it to the house, 65, 75, and 82-yard runs this past year in 2020. He just needs to work on a couple things. One of those things is pass protection. You're not going to get on the field in the NFL if you can't pass protect. So hopefully that won't be his downfall. And number 10 on my list is Ramondre Stevenson out of Oklahoma. 231 pounds, big athlete. He only had 193 touches at the FBS level, so there's plenty of tread left on his tires. A lot of guys go, oh, well, he didn't start all 3 years, or, oh, he only had limited number of touches. Yeah, a lot of guys had limited number of touches. Alvin Kamara was one of them. You don't want these guys all beat up, but you do want a guy who's durable and able to play. So there's a fine line there. So that rounds out my top 10. Again, these are how I have them ranked. And by the way, it's the first section I've updated for 2021 season on the Hall of Fame Fantasy Football site. These lists are up there right now for you to follow, as well as PPR, Standard, Dynasty. I have all the rookie class broken down into position groups, just like we're reviewing here today.
Yeah, and awesome stuff on HallOfFameFantasyFootball.com, as Mike has given us his top 10 at running back for this year's upcoming draft. Najee Harris, as well as Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, Trey Sermon, Kenneth Gainwell, Chuba Hubbard, Kylene Hill, Jamar Jefferson, and Ramondre Stevenson is what he has given us here this morning as we look at his list. And we'll go ahead and get this set for wide receivers coming up in just a second. We'll flip over to my list here to get my thoughts on the running back position. And, you know, for me, this was tough. This was really difficult. Like I said, you know, my top 5-ish and whatnot, okay. And then after I come out of my top 5, I'm kind of sitting here going, I don't know. So, you know, this one was a little bit difficult because there's a bunch of guys you can put in these spots. My top 4, you know, to me, not hard to make. Outside of the top 4 is where I felt like things got a little bit more difficult to really sit down with and say, how I'm going to break this down and what am I really going to think, you know, as far as running back wise. So my number 1 is a number 1 that I believe is a name that has been heard for years. It's somebody who is no stranger to being out there and hearing this name repeatedly, and it's also the name that Mike had on his list of running backs at number 1. So my number 1 running back for the NFL draft here in 2021, my number 1 is Najee Harris. Najee Harris coming to us from Alabama and the Nick Saban world. Najee Harris, to me, one of those guys that I believe can make an immediate impact on a team. My number 2, and I said an interesting situation here, if things go a certain way in the mock, well, we'll do our mock draft next week, but if things go a certain way in the actual draft, there is the reality that the Jacksonville Jaguars could end up with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne. They could actually end up with the teammates from Clemson, and I covered these guys for the whole time they've been at Clemson, and I could tell you with utter certainty if Jacksonville pulls off one, which they should with Trevor Lawrence, if they get both, then you could be looking at a nice Jacksonville team and some Clemson fans all of a sudden paying attention to Jacksonville. My number 3 is Javonte Williams, another guy that I covered, got to see him the first week of the season when he played up against the Syracuse Orange and was able to take care of them and handle them at home in North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and that's Javonte Williams. And Michael Carter, his teammate. So again, Mike and I don't see each other's list before we do this, and our top 4 is exactly the same. So the Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, North Carolina connection here. I want to give a shout out to my guy DeAndre Smith, who was at North Carolina training Michael Carter before anybody even knew who he was. So a lot of great players that have had the DeAndre Smith, Midas touch, so to speak. And one of them being Darwin Thompson, who came over from Utah State, won a Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs, and now Michael Carter of North Carolina. My number 5 is a guy that I got to see in the ACC as well, a guy, covering there inside of Virginia Tech, and that's Khalil Herbert. So Khalil Herbert is my number 5. Numbers-wise, just liked him a little bit better than some of the other guys out there. So I'm going to give him a nod at number 5 here on my top 10 running backs in the 2021 NFL Draft. And then, you know, this is where life gets interesting from 6 to 10, as I was talking about before. This is where I kind of sit here and say, where am I going to lean and where am I going to go? So Memphis translates their running backs to the NFL, especially in recent history, extremely well. So I'm going to go with Kenneth Gainwell here at number 6. Kenneth Gainwell is going to pull this for me. Memphis has been able to send the Antonio Gibsons of the world to the NFL in recent history, and obviously has done a great job with everybody that they sent, the Darrell Hendersons as well, coming out of Memphis. My number 7 on my list is going to be Trey Sermon. Trey Sermon out of Ohio State dips a couple spots from Mike's list to my number 7 on the board here. His numbers aren't fantastic, but I do trust that he can go in somewhere and make an impact on a team this year inside of the NFL. My number 8 and 9, I knew where I was going with number 10. Number 10's kind of a sleeper. By his numbers, he's not a sleeper, but where he went to college and the lack of respect that I think he received, this is where I get pissed off about this. So I'm not happy with where this guy is to some people, but he's ranked high on some other boards that I'm looking at, and I'm okay with that. I'm very happy with other people in this country actually supporting and knowing this name and giving him some respect. So he's going to be my number 10. I'll hold off on that for a second, but I will go with Kylan Hill here and right around where Mike had him. So I'll put him into this as the board is making it difficult for me to do what I want to do here. So I will, but I'm going to go with Kylan Hill here on the board and to give him the nod as I take a look at, my top 10 for running backs here in this year's draft. So I appreciate you being here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora inside of the Cafe Kubal studios. And once again, as we look at the rest of my list, I'll be going here to just kind of let everybody know, if you're just tuning in, number 1, Najee Harris for me, which is the same as Mike. My number 2, Travis Etienne, also the same as Mike, as we had the same first ones here coming through for running backs in this year's NFL Draft. And I want to let you know that you could join our Winning Fantasy Football group on Facebook today by just searching Winning Fantasy Football in the Facebook search bar. My number 3 and 4, also the same as Mr. Sofka, with Javonte Williams, as well as Michael Carter. And my number 5 here, different than Mr. Sofka. So my number 5 here on my board, a little bit different here, and that being Khalil Herbert out of Virginia Tech. So Khalil Herbert here. And then at number 6, going to Memphis, a well that's been able to give to the NFL, and I credit them a lot with the work that they've done in Memphis, because they've been changing coaches out there as well and still finding a way. So Kenneth Gainwell gets my number 6. My number 7 went to Trey Sermon. And my number 8, as I said just a second ago, my number 8 here on the board for my top running backs in this year's class, Kylan Hill is going to go there. So Kylan Hill is going to take this out of Mississippi State. And my number 9 is going to go to Mike's number 10. My number 9 on my board for running backs in this year's draft is going to go to Ramondre Stevenson out of Oklahoma. Ramondre Stevenson right here on my board, right by the end of the top 10. And my number 10, again, as I alluded to, is somebody that I don't think gets the respect that he deserves. His numbers are strong. He had 1,072 yards most recently, and he does not get talked about enough. Sometimes I don't think he gets talked about at all, but Buffalo's been able to put together some great things. Remember Khalil Mack, and my guy Mike Washington Jr. out of Central New York just went there and is in spring ball right now to be the new running back in Buffalo. But Jarrett Patterson out of Buffalo, my sleeper, who makes my top 10 list right at number 10. at running back, as I believe that he is going to make an impact on whatever team is smart enough to choose him. So I'm going to give him that love and show him that respect there. Mike and I will take our final fast break of this morning, and when we come back, we'll be bringing you receiving on the side of things here and let you know who we believe are our top 10 receivers in this year's draft. That's all coming to you where sports meets life on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. As always, we appreciate you being here inside of the Cafe Kubal studios. And as I said before, make sure that you join our Winning Fantasy Football group on Facebook. You could do that right now. And for those of you on Facebook Live, on Facebook.com/LiveNowDT, just type in Winning Fantasy Football to the Facebook search bar. You'll get us there, and you'll be able to connect with us immediately and 24/7. We'll be back right after this fast break inside of the Cafe Kubal studios with more of the Fantasy Football Power Hour right here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, presented by the Wildcat Sports Pub. Welcome back here to Wake Up Call.
Cafe Kubal Mobile Cafe brings the cafe experience to you. We'll roll out to your neighborhood or office, ready to serve our locally crafted espresso bar to our loyal patrons. Inquire at cafekubal.com. Cafe Kubal, coffee for the soul.
Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory, located on 201 7th North Street in Liverpool, is home to over 40 flavors with more than 200 flavors in their total wheelhouse. Sky's the limit for this sweet and savory Central New York company. Keep it local at your parties, fundraisers, wedding showers, baby showers, and more by calling 315-450-MA-PA. That's 315-450-6272 for popcorn bars with custom flavors and colors at your upcoming event. Make sure to visit them on 201 7th North Street in Liverpool, New York. And for more information, go to maandpassnacks.com. Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory. How corny are you? The Millhouse Market, located on 3790 New York 13 in Pulaski, New York, is worth the drive every time. Make sure you make your way out to the Millhouse Market, but before you head out there, download their app on the Google Play or Apple App Store. There you'll have at your fingertips all of their homemade breads, desserts, quinoa bowls, rice bowls, salads, brick oven pizzas, and sandwiches named after the families that helped to settle today's Pulaski. Ingraining them in our community and ingraining them in our taste buds, I challenge you to find your favorite at the Millhouse Market and not change it the next week when you go back. The Millhouse Market, truly incredible, and open for you Tuesday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and on Sundays from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., closed on Mondays, and their drive-thru as well as their general store and in-store dining. That's right off the general store. They have a nice little restaurant there to dine in. You can do all of that from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Tuesday through Saturday and 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Sunday. Make sure you head into their general store, and after you get your favorite food and sit down and have a bite to eat, or you go through the drive-thru, don't forget to take some time in the general store to support local businesses throughout Pulaski, upstate, and central New York, as the Millhouse Market goes one step beyond being a local business, and they do that by supporting local businesses within their local business. So make sure you go out there. I've gotten different dry seasonings to put on my food, as well as honey that's locally sourced right here, made right here, and I got local maple syrup as well. So it wasn't enough for me to go into the Millhouse Market and look at that incredible menu and order some great stuff, but I also wanted to support other companies with syrups and, like I said, different dry rubs and honey as well. So thank you to all the companies that are supported by the Millhouse Market, and make sure you support local by heading out there today to 3790 New York 13 in Pulaski, New York. Absolutely positively worth the drive every time. With that being stated, Mike Sofka here with me inside of the Fantasy Football Power Hour every single Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So Mike and I are here talking with you about the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends in this year's draft. Mike, I know that tight ends, sometimes it's hard to find that list of 10 that you're going to get in the receiving game that could put up some numbers and whatnot. So it's totally up to you. We can give our tight end list, or we can kind of merge the wide receiver tight ends into a receiving list for the top 10, whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah, I'm prepared to go either way here with, I have the top tight ends. I have the receivers. I know a lot of people are listening to this or looking at this for some dynasty information. So, I happen to have them ranked already. I spent a good amount of time on this. So if you want to combine them, that's fine. If you are going to combine them, it is a little bit different, and there's no problem with that. It's just I don't want to overshadow some of these guys, and one of the guys I don't want to overshadow is Jamar Chase, LSU guy. I mean, let's face it, this guy is just a stud. He's fast, he's big, 208 pounds, 6 foot. He's almost like a prototypical receiver, and he seems to be the best one in the class. Then number 2 and number 3 on my list are a little bit funny for some folks. Jalen Waddle. I think he's the better receiver out of him and Devonta Smith, who I have at number 3. Devonta Smith went on to win the Heisman when Waddle went down. So any one of those 3 guys is more than capable of being the number 1 receiver on anybody's list. But I have them Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and Devonta Smith. Then it gets a little more dicey. Then it gets a little more tricky for some folks, if you would. But I like Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. Not a lot of people saw this guy play. Not a lot of people are aware that Minnesota had a wide receiver. Well, this guy was a Big Ten Receiver of the Year. This guy can do everything. I'm trying to find holes in this guy's game, and I don't know if I can. He was one of the highest graded receivers in the country as a sophomore, and he led the nation in yards per run from an outside alignment. So this is a guy who can line up inside with speed, but he can also line up outside, handle those bigger corners. Then I go down to number 5, Terrace Marshall. And again, some people are going to be like, who? He does what? Well, you got to look at these guys. Terrace Marshall, all he did was step up at LSU. He took over the Justin Jefferson role. He exploded as being the guy, racking up 23 touchdowns on 94 catches over the past 2 years. This guy is not even 21 years old. There's very few receivers who can catch this guy. This guy is underrated, I think, as well as Rashad Bateman. I got no problem with him being number 5 on my list. Here's another one that's going to be underrated. Rondell Moore from Purdue. He's kind of a different breed. He breaks tackles. As a true freshman in 2018, he's had some injuries that slowed him down. But this is a guy who's 5'7", 180 pounds on his pro day, fast. He's not just fast like a 40 time. He's fast in his decision making. He's quick. He can cut quickly. So this is a guy to watch out for. He was a mismatch for a lot of people in that played Purdue this year. Now going on to number 7, I like a guy, and a lot of people are going to say, who? Again, I like a guy, Tillin Wallace. This is a guy who, gave me flashbacks to a Des Bryant type kind of guy. His 2020 stats alone, he's just shy of 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns on 60 receptions, averaging 15.6 catch. So that's what you like. You like guys who can create the yak, the yards after the catch, or the yards after contact. You like guys who can take it to the house. And speaking of take it to the house, the only comparison I have to my next guy, who's at number 8, is to Tyreek Hill. And I'm talking about Kadarius Toney. This is a guy who could take it to the house on any play. He wore number 1 for the Florida Gators for a reason. He had 70 receptions, 984 yards, and 10 touchdowns last year. So this is a guy who can get it done. He's also can get it done on those NFL jet sweeps and so forth. So this is a guy to watch out for in the draft. Another guy to watch out for in the draft is Elijah Moore. I know he's got a lot more press than some of the other guys I mentioned do, but Elijah Moore, you won't find a slot receiver with more tough catches on tape than him. 73% of his contested catch opportunities this past year were from that position, and his 1,193 yards. That's huge when you're a receiver in college. You just don't see 1,000-yard receivers coming out of college. Well, Elijah Moore's a big-body guy. He's a guy that can get it done. And last but not least, on my wide receiver only top 10 ranking, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, you may recognize that St. Brown name. His brother just went pro not too long ago, Equanimous St. Brown. Well, in a lot of families, the younger sibling, if the older and the younger sibling are both talented, the younger one is usually the more talented one. Why? He got an earlier start. He was traveling to Big Brother's baseball games when they were little, and sometimes he'd pick up the bat or glove, and I've known youth to be forced to play in the upper age group because their brother was there, and sure enough, the bigger brother didn't go pro. The younger brother did because he was forced to perform at a younger age. Look, this is a guy who's nearly 6 foot, nearly 200 pounds. He can make plays out of USC. You can't go to USC unless you're a good football player. This is a guy who has upside written all over him. I look for Amon-Ra St. Brown to make somebody's roster this year. He's number 10 on my wide receiver only rankings.
Coming here from Mike Sofka, his top 10 wide receiver rankings for this year's NFL draft for 2021. Coming to us with Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Rashad Bateman, Terrence Marshall Jr., Rondale Moore, Tylen Wallace, and Kadarius Toney, Elijah Moore, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And that is your list for Mr. Sofka on the wide receiver only world. And so giving us that, definitely appreciate Mike's list. And now it is time for me to flip over to my list of wide receivers for this season in the 2021 NFL draft for the upcoming draft here, and what my thoughts are overall on who I think are the top 10. And my list definitely, I know Mike has some different guys here that he said you may not be thinking of and whatnot, and I do as well. So my list is going to be a little bit different. That's why I love doing these things, because it allows us the opportunity to showcase what we're both thinking, and sometimes it's exactly the same, and sometimes it is very different. So my wide receiver only list, let's get it started. So my first one is a guy who could very well be reuniting with his quarterback Joe Burrow, and that is Jamar Chase out of LSU, same as Mike's number one as well. My number two is a guy that I just have tremendous respect for. He's actually trending on Twitter right now, but Devontae Smith is my number two. And my number three, and this is where I don't know. I got a good feeling about his upside. He's risen up my list. I know he was lower on Mike's list, but Elijah Moore is my number three on my list. I have a feeling his immediate impact is going to be huge for whatever team picks him up, and I have him higher here because I just think that he is going to be able to do some good things inside the NFL. Like Mike said, over 1,000 yards receiving. My number four, he went higher on my list than Mike had him, and I'm a fan. I'm definitely a big fan about a lot of the things happening in Florida. Kadarius Toney is my number four on my rankings for the top 10 wide receivers in this year's NFL draft for 2021. And my number five is Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore out of Purdue is going to take my number five here as we get set for the back half of my top 10. And my number six of my top 10 wide receivers for this year's NFL draft, my number six is going to go to Rashad Bateman. My number six will go to Rashad, as Mike had mentioned before. Mr. Bateman will take the top end of my bottom half here. So Rashad Bateman is going to be my number 6. And then some guys that you may not have heard Mike say, but I just have a good feeling about them. This guy he did say, but he's a little bit lower on my list, is Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle out of Bama, who obviously spent time with Devontae Smith. Jalen is going to take my number 7 here. I'm not as sold on him. I'm more sold on Elijah Moore. And so Jalen gets put at number 7. My number 8 on my list, I'm going to give to... This is tough because I got the last 3 guys. I'm kind of sitting with exactly how I wanted them to round out this thing. But I'm going to give it to Terrace Marshall Jr., which was Mike's number 5. So Terrace Marshall Jr. out of LSU is going to take my number 8 on the list. And my number 9 and my number 10 are 2 guys that Mike did not say, but I think that they're coming from programs that are reputable, and they did good work there, and I think there's a lot of good to be had. Marlon Williams out of UCF is my number 9. His muscle, what he's done, the way that he plays, I became a fan of Marlon Williams the first time that I watched him play a game. So Marlon Williams, I think, can make an immediate impact. He's a guy that I could see go to a place like New Orleans that needs some depth there and immediately do something for the team. I like Marlon. I think, as far as being agile for his size and his muscle and his ability, he is an incredible talent as far as, like I said, just his body structure on top of the fact of running routes and different things he can do and fighting you in the end zone. So I like Marlon Williams. And my last guy is a shout out and an ode to the amazing work by Tim Lester and his team at Western Michigan. This guy played up against Syracuse, and he's a guy who's not too far down on other lists that I have seen by any stretch of the imagination. In some lists, he is around the top 10, the top 15, and that is Dwayne Eskridge coming out of Western Michigan. Dwayne Eskridge, a terror for some people out there, and I think that he could be a nice addition to an NFL team that does their homework on Dwayne Eskridge and gives him an opportunity. So that is how it looks for me at my wide receivers. Once again, if you're just tuning in, listening, or watching, my top 10 wide receivers for the 2021 NFL Draft as Mike and I release our rankings for the first time ever on Wake Up Call. Jamar Chase, number 1. Devontae Smith, number 2. Elijah Moore at 3 for me. Kadarius Toney at 4. 5. Rondale Moore. 6. Rashad Bateman. 7. Jalen Waddle. 8. Terrace Marshall Jr. Number 9. Marlon Williams. And number 10. Dwayne Eskridge out of Western Michigan. Mike, if you'd like, we can quickly here go to the tight end side of things. And I think it's pretty clear where both of us are going to start on this board. But if you would like to jump to the strict tight ends board for this, we can do that, of course, and give your thoughts on the tight end position as we get set here for this year's NFL Draft whenever you're ready.
Have a doubt. We're definitely going to, talk about Kyle Pitts to start out with. I think that he has the ability to be the number 1 pass catcher. On top, if we were going to combine these 2 lists, the wide receiver and tight end list, you'd have to put Kyle Pitts number 1. And the reason for that is not only about his size, his speed, his abilities as a receiver, but he marks the biggest difference. He's going to be lined up. He's going to be titled as a tight end, creating those large mismatches. When you're playing fantasy football, you want a great tight end. You want to have one of the top 3 or 4 tight ends. If you don't, you're just like everyone else. This guy makes a difference. His wingspan is 83 3/8 inches. What does that tell you? That's just under 7 feet across. You get the ball to him, he's going to catch it. 10 5/8 inches hands, nearly 34-inch arms. This is a guy who's built to play tight end at an extremely high level, such as a Travis Kelce, mixed in with a little Dallas Clark, mixed in with a little George Kittle. Now, I'm not crowning him yet, but it's quite obvious because everybody's talking about him as top 10 talent, and he definitely is. Definitely worthy of the number 1 spot on tight end or tight end / wide receiver rankings. Going on down my list here, number 2, Pat Freiermuth. This is a guy who I really believe is going to be the pick of the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars are going to take him, not Travis Etienne, with their last pick in the first round. This is a guy who would be the number tight end in the draft, and he still would warrant second round or so. But the Jags need a tight end. They needed a tight end. They brought people in. It hasn't worked. I believe Pat Freiermuth will be a tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Had a solid career at Penn State, solid up and down, can block, can catch the ball. This is a guy who you can count on. This is a guy who you wouldn't mind having at tight end. Then number 3, I go on to Brevin Jordan. Brevin Jordan out of Miami. He kind of looked like a running back for a while there. He still looks like a running back, okay? The only problem is that he's not really an inline threat. He has speed, and he has yards after the catch. It's just a matter of getting that guy who's shaped like a running back, getting him to play more tight end, getting him to block on the outside, getting him to break away from that block and be able to release and save his quarterback out of a bad situation. He's still got a lot of upside and some growth to do. Number 4 on my list is Tommy Tremble. This is where people start to say, who? He does what? Tommy Tremble is at a Notre Dame. He's the best blocker out of the bunch. So some teams are just going to look at him as a blocker. Like a Kyle Juszczyk kind of guy. They may even line him up or draft him as a fullback for teams that are looking for that option as well. Number 5, Hunter Long out of Boston College. He started slow, but his performance this past season ran him up 682 yards and 11 touchdowns. This is a guy who has yet to prove that he can block. So he's got the opposite problem. But he has the physical tools, and he can be a true inline guy on the NFL level. Briley Moore out of Kansas State. Briley Moore is my number 6. He couldn't do anything when he was at Northern Iowa. I guess it was just play calling, play selection, the way they saw him. Well, he grad transfer to Kansas State, and he goes on and sets career highs in receptions at 22 and yards at 338. Now, he's a blocking type guy as well, but he can break away and catch the ball. So these guys I got ranked from number 4 or 5 on down. This is Dynasty League only stuff. I don't want you considering these guys in a redraft league. I want to be clear. Noah Gray is my number 7 out of Duke. He's the kind of guy you love in college, but he's not. He can block a little, he can catch a little, he can pass a little. He's well-rounded, but he doesn't do any one thing so well that it makes you take a second look at him. But at a Duke, he is still a guy who can make it to the NFL and can make a difference. Number 8, John Bates out of Boise State. This is a guy who, he was 229 pounds in his freshman season. At the Senior Bowl, he showed up at 259 pounds. This is a guy who's built like a big body guy. He will definitely be an inline blocker with the ability to catch the ball. Number 9, Kyle Granson. It's Granson. So that's why I mispronounced that there. Granson, he's the type of a guy that a lot of guys can fall in love with. He's 235 pounds this past season. He's not athletic enough to be a full-time receiver, and he's not physical enough to be that inline tight end, but he can do a little of both. He does well enough, and if he gets coached up the right way, he will be superior at one of those two crucial skills as a tight end in the NFL. And Matt Bushman rounds out the top 10 at a BYU. He did opt out, but he may have been regretting that decision, seeing what Zach Wilson was able to do. He did haul in 72 targets in 2019. So I think this is a guy who's mature enough and has the ability enough to make the top 10 and make a difference in the NFL. So again, these are more so for dynasty selections. I wouldn't recommend from 4 or 5 down in my top 10 list being drafted in redraft for the next couple years.
That coming here from Mike Sofka as he gives your tight end list for this year's 2021 NFL Draft. And for me to give you my top 10 for this year's tight ends, I think is kind of it's kind of interesting for me to take a look at this, and because of the fact that I could very easily, and that's why I said it's kind of funny to me, I could write Kyle Pitts over this entire board and say let's move on, but as much respect as I have for Kyle Pitts, I have respect for players all over the country. So as good as he is, and as much as he can bring to the offense, and as much as he can help you as one of those tight ends that truly, is going to come at you like a receiver and, give you that opportunity. I mean, when you have the opportunity to draft a tight end who can end up being your number one wide receiver, your number one receiving target on your team, that's a special moment. And Kyle Pitts is a special, special player. And obviously having him at number 2 is no surprise. At number 1, at Pat Freiermuth here for me, same as Mike out of Penn State, have him at number 2 on my list. And I believe that he can make an impact as well. I mean, Kyle, with what he'll be able to do, some of these other guys it's obviously, they're going to be undershadowed, so to speak. And I don't want you to forget about them because teams need this. And if you need any reality of that, Jacksonville has been looking for a tight end for multiple years, and they drafted one and it didn't work out. And they, consistent last year, we're looking at like 3, 4, 5 guys. And, so it is a very integral part of it. It changes the game for you, a la Rob Gronkowski for Tom Brady. So, we see things like this, a la Tony Gonzalez. We've seen what guys can do. Hunter Henry when he's healthy, Antonio Gates when he was playing for the Chargers. So there's a lot of good that can come from that position that needs to be obviously respected, I think, more than it is. And hopefully Kyle Pitts will bring something to that, and these other guys will as well. My number 3 is going to stick with what Mike had to say as well. Brevin Jordan out of Miami is going to be my number 3 on the list. My number 4 is going, actually my top 5 are the same as Mike's. My number 4 is Tommy Tremble. Tommy Tremble is going to take this here. I do think that he can make an impact on his team, whoever ends up deciding to pick him up. And Hunter Long, I don't think you can ever underestimate these players, in my opinion, when Hunter Long is one of those guys that's, and I know that my coach isn't there anymore in Boston College, but Hunter Long, Boston College, they know how to run the ball. They know how to do some pretty awesome things to condense the clock on offense, and Hunter Long got to be a part of BC's offense. So I'm going to put him there. Tommy Tremble just a little bit above him out of Notre Dame. And then one of the guys that I got to interview and be around, as far as having him here on the show, he's my number 6. I'm really happy that he is here, and that's Kenny Yeboah. So Kenny Yeboah is going to get something here. I'm hoping for him to be a little dark horse in this year's draft and make somebody a very happy team that they decided to take a chance on him. Kenny Yeboah coming out of Ole Miss is who I will give the nod to next. And then from here at my number 7, I'm going to go with Trey McKitty out of Georgia. So Trey McKitty is going to take my number 7 here as we round out tight ends on my side of it. My 8, my 9, and my 10. My number 8 at tight end is going to go to Kylen Granson out of SMU. A big fan of what SMU is doing under Sonny Dykes, and a lot of respect for him and their offense's ability to stay in games, and Shane Buechele and everything he got to do. Granson working with Buechele, who was my number 10 quarterback and Mike's number 10 quarterback in our rankings this year, helps him out. I think that Kylen can be a little dark horse in this year's draft as well. I'm going to go to Matt Bushman as my number 9, very close to where Mike had him out of BYU. And, Mike talking about the fact that he decided to opt out, and BYU ended up doing some great things with Zach Wilson. So Matt Bushman, but, opting out can hopefully help him to have less wear and tear on his body. So there is a positive to this. And my number 10 is going to go to, and this is one where, you can look at a bunch of different players. You can look at a bunch of different guys that can fit maybe within this. Mike said a couple of them, but I am going to go with John Bates out of Boise State. Noah Gray, hard to not put him here, but I'm going to go with John Bates out of Boise State at number 10 to round out my top 10 tight ends. So once again, my tight end list, top 10 rankings for this year's NFL draft is number 1, Kyle Pitts, number 2, Pat Freiermuth, 3, Brevin Jordan, 4, Tommy Tremble, 5, Hunter Long, 6, Kenny Yeboah, 7, Trey McKitty, 8, Kylan Granson, 9, Matt Bushman, and 10, John Bates. And those are our picks here of what we have ranking-wise. That's what we have for you here this morning. Mike didn't know my list. I didn't know his, which is incredible. So as we release it to you, we release it to each other, which is always a lot of fun to do. And Mike and I have plenty coming up on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. You're not going to want to miss a second of what's coming up after this. So, Mike, any final notes here as we gave our top 10 quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends in this year's draft? So, any final thoughts here, Mike, as we gave our quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends?
Not a lot. I just updated those lists again on my site, halloffamefantasyfootball.com. I am going to be posting a link to that on the Facebook group, Winning Fantasy Football. So I do have a complete list, top 10 each position of the rookies, top 10 each position for PPR leagues, top 10 for each position for standard scoring leagues, and top 10 for each position if you're in a dynasty startup league. So there's 4 different top 10s available to you. I'm still updating the rest of the site. The rest of the site's not 100% updated, so excuse that when you get there. But I'm going to put this link up on the Facebook, and everyone can go check it out in writing on my website. And, of course, I'll be updating these lists throughout the year here before the season, because it's not going to do you any good what I ranked on April 21st rather than what you need in August and September when you're drafting. There's a lot of time between now and then, so I constantly update these things as well. So I look forward to a successful season, and I look forward to our next show where we actually do a mock draft here.
Yeah, we're going to be doing a mock draft on the screen in our Florida in Focus series. At the week of the draft, I will, ironically, the week that my team is drafting first overall, I will be in their state. The second home of Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora is the great state of Florida, and I will be down in Florida during the draft, and it just, life is a beautiful melody, and it all kind of worked out. So Mike and I will have our mock draft for you, the first time that we're ever going to do a mock draft on the show where you can physically see it as it happens. So very excited about that. That's coming up this coming Wednesday, and every Wednesday, the Fantasy Football Power Hour. Mike's going to be my special guest all through the Wednesday show in the Florida in Focus series. So next week when we're down in Florida, and it's April 28th, Mike will be with me the whole way through for the show, not just 10 to 11. He'll be with me the whole time. So very excited to bring that to you. Always excited to bring you Mike Sofka and all the work he does at halloffamefantasyfootball.com. And, of course, check him out and me out at Winning Fantasy Football, our Facebook group. So you can join that Facebook group for free. All you got to do is have a Facebook profile and click on Winning Fantasy Football or type it into your search bar. Mike, as always, I appreciate your time. Thank you for your expertise and your hard work, effort, and enthusiasm. And I look forward to talking with you very soon when we do our mock draft.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
All right, take care. That coming from Mike Sofka here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, hanging out with us where sports truly meets that thing called life, and we appreciate Mr. Sofka for being here with us every Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time here inside of the, not a or not one of, but the Fantasy Football Power Hour, proudly presented by the Wildcat Sports Pub. Find your way to the Wildcat today and every day during the week for awesome food and awesome experience. And as we get back to what we know to be, some normalcy and whatnot, the Wildcat has navigated through so much with us. They've done an incredible job because they have incredible people on their team, led by Danny Tome. And thank you to the Wildcat for all you do for West Genesee Athletics, for our monthly shows that we do there, as well as everything I get to do on site, including the fantasy football drafts and our fantasy football connection. So, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends presented to you by the Wildcat Sports Pub today, as Mike and I unveil our list for the first time ever, giving you our top 10 rankings at each of those positions as we head into the NFL draft. And so our early thoughts on what these gentlemen can be to the NFL once they are drafted. So, with that being stated, a thank you to Mike Sofka, a thank you to my our one guest in our video special, Mr. Fred Reed out of Eastern Michigan, who came through Syracuse after he was given an opportunity by Scott Schaefer to be the defensive backs coach. Now he's the pass game coordinator and safeties coach at Eastern Michigan, where he's been since he left Syracuse. So a big shout out to both of these wonderful gentlemen, to Fred Reed and Mike Sofka. Find us on Facebook at Wake Up Call DT, Twitter at Call DT, and Instagram at Wake Up Call _DT. And of course, every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life, on mixlr.com /Wake Up Call DT, as well as on wakeupcalldt.com's homepage, facebook.com /live-now-DT, and on youtube.com /Wake Up Call DT is how you can connect with the show every single Monday through Friday from now at 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So make sure you're doing that. And our Florida in Focus series will be carried on the Facebook and YouTube outlets next week. And of course, after the shows go live, you can search for them, and over 1,500 available to you by searching Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on Stitcher, Spotify, MixLR, YouTube, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and Podbean itself. So make sure you search Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora to hang out with us, where sports truly meets that thing called life, every single Monday through Friday. And we appreciate you so very much for hanging out with us there. And after the shows go live Monday through Friday, you can go and check them out on any one of these outlets, which we implore you to go there and check out all of our wonderful places that we have been able to share the show with. And that is with incredible thanks to Stitcher, MixLR, Spotify, YouTube, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Podbean, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts, and everywhere where you can get Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. And a big shout out to all of our wonderful guests that we have here, or all of our wonderful community people that we have, everyone we've had on the show. We had an incredible show last night at Pizza Man. Found out something after the show that is not true. I don't believe it by any stretch of the imagination. Got to have some really good conversations with the community. They know who they are when I say I don't believe it. But it's really awesome and really great experience. Had a great time at Pizza Man, as always. And a big shout out to Jim and Jimmy and Luke and everybody that's over there. Many thanks to each and every single one of you, to Heather and to everybody. Cafe Kubal, Carvel DeWitt, Wildcat Sports Pub, Avicoli's, Canine Camp, Dog Daycare, Chick-fil-A Cicero, Honda City of Liverpool, Pizza Man, Millhouse Market, Canine Campground Dog Boarding, and Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory. Go to maandpaspopcorn.com today and use the promo code DT20 for 20% off. It's always up there right here where it says what's poppin'. 20% off at maandpaspopcorn.com for in-store pickup and delivery to all 50 states. So make sure you utilize that service and get 20% off on me. In the meantime, I hope you have a fantastic day. We'll be back with Papa Joe and a special guest tomorrow morning for Thursday, April 22nd. In the meantime, find us on Facebook at Wake Up Call DT, Twitter at Call DT, and Instagram at Wake Up Call _DT. And as always, God bless, no stress, do your best. I'll talk with you soon.